Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's Thursday. We have a game tonight between the New Orleans Saints and the Denver Broncos. Who you going to start and who you going to sit? You know, we've kind of been spoiled this year with Thursday Night Football. We've only had divisional matchups up to this point, and last week we had a pretty good game between the Seahawks and Niners. This week, we are back to the bottom of the barrel in terms of NFL matchups, and unfortunately, injuries are a big reason why. The New Orleans Saints are depleted. Chris Olave is out with a concussion. Rashid Shaheed out with a knee injury. He just had surgery. He might be going on IR. Derek Carr is doubtful with an oblique injury. Taysom Hill is also doubtful. And you know that doubt is spelled with a silent B. You might as well spell it with a silent D. Those two players will not play tonight. On the Broncos side of the ball, they're without two cornerbacks, most notably Patrick Surtain, who's out with a concussion. So at least that kind of nullifies the loss of Olave. But they're also without two offensive tackles. McGlinchey and Palszewski are not playing. Linebacker Browning also out. And wide receiver Josh Reynolds is on IR with a finger injury. He is not available. So both sides of the ball are dealing with injuries. It's mainly the Saints, though, who are at a massive disadvantage. So let's get into these start-sit decisions where it's unfortunate because there's some excellent matchups that are kind of wasted. However, the most obvious player you're starting in this game would be Alvin Kamara. You are starting him no matter what. In his last 4 games, he's averaging 15 points per game on 22.5 touches, massive volume, 5.3 catches, a lot of targets, 94 total yards, and 2 touchdowns. And that's pretty much exactly what he did last week in week 6 with Spencer Rattler. He had 18 touches, 5 catches on 8 targets, a total 64 yards, and a touchdown. 14.9 points is his average over the last 4 games. So I still think you're starting Kamara while the offense is pretty bad. I don't think he'll move the ball very well. If anyone's scoring a touchdown, it would most likely be Kamara in the Saints offense. So you kind of have to start him. He's my running back 9 this week. He gets a downgrade, but I think he's earned your trust this season. The volume's enough to keep his floor viable. He probably finds the end zone. I still think he's a top 10 running back. I would start him. The only other player I am starting with confidence, though, would be the Broncos defense. They are my number 1 ranked defense this week because they get Spencer Rattler, Kamara, and like no one else on the opposite side of the ball. It feels pretty guaranteed that the Broncos shut down the Saints offense. This year, they rank 4th in total points, only allowing 16 per game from their opponent. They are 5th in passing yards, only 170 allowed, 14th in rushing yards, only 114 per game allowed, and 4th in total yards per game allowed, an average of 284 per game. So the Broncos defense has really stepped up. While they are without one of their best players, Surtain, I still think they're the best play this week because the Saints offense is just dog shit. So the Broncos will contribute. Otherwise, though, good luck starting anyone with confidence. I do think Courtland Sutton deserves some flex consideration this week. He is getting Marshawn Lattimore coverage. That's never ideal. However, the Saints against wide receivers are a top 10 matchup. They allow 31 points per game to the position, an average 14.8 catches per game, 182 yards per game, 3 receiving touchdowns, as well as a rushing touchdown. So I think the odds that Sutton actually finds the end zone are somewhat decent, a little higher than 50-50, but I think his floor from a yardage standpoint will be close to 10 points. That's what he's been giving you the last 4 games, an average of 10.3 points per game on 7.8 targets per game, 4 catches for 53 yards per game, and 2 touchdowns over the last 4 weeks. Bo Nix is starting to lock on a little bit more to Courtland Sutton. So he's become more viable lately, especially with Josh Reynolds out with that finger injury. Reynolds was the clear number 2, and now it's completely up for grabs. Sutton is distinguishing himself as the go-to target for Bo Nix. So I do think he is a legit flex this week at number 32. You don't have to start him. I do think he has a safe floor this week, worth a start if you are a little bit desperate. Maybe you have CeeDee Lamb or DJ Moore on bye this week. You're trying to replace Jalen Tolbert, for instance. He's in that flex conversation, more on the lower side of the spectrum, though. At wide receiver 32, I would consider him in my lineup. If I was in a super flex league, I'd also consider Bo Nix in my lineup. He's my quarterback 16 this week, and I do think he might throw for multiple touchdowns. This season, he ranks as quarterback 19 in points per game with an average of 14.9. He has 5 touchdowns passing this season, 5 interceptions, but also an extra 2 rushing touchdowns, but he only has 1 game this year with over 216 passing yards. But where he is underrated is his mobility. He actually adds an average of 30 rushing yards per game this season, and Josh Allen, known for his rushing ability, averages 32. So Bo Nix is on par with Josh Allen this year in terms of rushing yards per game. So I do think his floor is pretty high. I do think there is some touchdown upside because it's the Sean Payton revenge game, and against his former team, I do think he showcases his quarterback mainly because it's one of their few primetime games all season long in front of a national audience. He will let the world know Bo Nix is legit. So I do think he's a top 20 quarterback this week at quarterback 16. He's a very low end streamer. I don't think I'd start him in a 1 quarterback format, but if you are in a 2 quarterback league, Bo Nix deserves a start this week. I'm also flexing the Saints defense. Technically at defense, it's not really a flex, but they are right on the fringe, my defense number 12. And while they just gave up 50 points to the Buccaneers last week, the Broncos are not the same caliber offense, and they also force a lot of turnovers. The Saints have caught 10 interceptions on the season, along with 1 fumble to opposing quarterbacks. So I do think Nix can turn it over. I do think the Saints might catch some passes. And it's not like the Broncos offense is like that deadly. I doubt they give up like 30 plus points in this game. So I do think the Saints are somewhat viable on the lower end of the top 12, but they're not in the top 10. So I don't think you have to start them. I would consider dropping them if I needed to. I don't usually like to have a defense get locked on my bench on Thursday night. So you don't have to start him, but at number 12, you could consider it. Otherwise, though, I am benching every other player in this game. And it's a shame with Javonte Williams because he gets an elite matchup this week. The Saints rank top 2 against the position. Over their last 5 games, they've given up 27.6 points per game on average, 127 rushing yards per game, and 51 receiving yards per game on 5.9 yards per carry, 5.2 catches per game, 5 touchdowns on the ground, along with an extra receiving touchdown to the position. So Sean Tucker burned them last week, and I do think that one of these Broncos running backs could be successful. However, it's such a committee, I don't feel good about it, and Javonte has done nothing to distinguish himself as a trustworthy player in your fantasy lineup. He does get the most touches. However, he's only averaging 7.5 points per game. He does not have a single touchdown. However, he does have 2 fumbles over the last 4 games. So Javonte is a liability. I do not expect 10 points from him. Even in a good matchup, I think he could legitimately lose his job by the end of October. I really do not have any faith in Javonte. So it's a great matchup, but it's wasted here. I'm not going to stress over it. I am benching Javonte. I do not care. However, I do think Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime have some opportunity to provide good bets because the lines on them on Underdog are very low. I'll get to them later, but Jaleel McLaughlin is the only running back in this backfield who has scored a single touchdown. He actually has 2 over the last 4 games. And Audric Estime, while he only has 4 career touches, is averaging 6.8 yards per carry. I would not be shocked if the score gets a little out of hand and Sean Payton decides, you know what? Let's have auditions for this running back job. Let's see what Jaleel and Estime can do. Let's keep Javonte on the bench as we don't really need him. So I am very interested to watch both Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime, but I don't think you're starting any Broncos running back this week. It's just such an ugly committee. I really have no confidence in any of them. So good matchup. It's just wasted. And then I don't know what you're getting from any of the Saints receivers. Last week, Bub Means was their best guy. He had 8 targets, 5 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. So he actually had 13 fantasy points, but without the touchdown, you barely got 7 points. And it does feel very risky. I'm not going to gamble on a Saints wide receiver in my lineup. If I was going with one of them, it would be Bub Means. He's my wide receiver 52 on the week. I did upgrade him yesterday. I didn't rank him. Now I looked a little closer into it. I'll put him in the top 60, but not the top 50. You're not starting Bub Means or anyone else. I have no interest in Cedric Wilson or A.T. Perry because you're also benching Spencer Rattler no matter what. This is a terrible matchup against Denver. Against the quarterback position, they rank bottom 3 this season. And although Patrick Surtain is not available, I'm not starting Spencer Rattler. Last week against Tampa, a very good matchup. He had 12.4 points, 243 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, an extra 27 rushing yards. 12.5 points is not enough for your fantasy lineup. So I actually rank him dead last this week. He is my least coveted quarterback at number 31 overall. There's only 30 quarterbacks playing, but I do account for Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in the ranks. So Spencer Rattler, literally the bottom of the quarterback rankings. There is no way I'm starting him. I'm also not starting either of the Saints tight ends. Maybe they step up, but it's not the player you think who's actually the most valuable this year. Foster Moreau is actually better. Moreau is averaging 4.6 points per game. He's the tight end 24 on the season. Meanwhile, Juwan Johnson is the tight end 29, averaging 3.9 points per game. So I have them back to back. I do have Moreau ranked higher at number 22, Juwan at number 23. I'm still not starting either of them. I'm also not giving a shit about the Denver tight ends. They're all unranked. They're pretty irrelevant this season. Greg Dulcich has been benched. And the backup running backs for the Saints, I think, are not safe to bet on either. I have Jamaal Williams and Kendre Miller, both unranked as well. They did not crack my top 50. I'm not giving any credence to the Broncos backup wide receivers. Last week, Devon Villay had the best game, but it's really unpredictable. Villay had 6 targets, 4 catches, and 78 yards, but it could really rotate to anyone else. It could be Troy Franklin this week. It could be Marvin Mims. They both had 3 targets last week. Franklin did score a touchdown, but how often will that actually repeat? I do not feel good about it. Maybe a little Jordan Humphrey in a revenge game gets the touchdown himself. So no thank you with any of them. I am definitely benching them. So here are my start-sit decisions. There's only 2 players you are starting with confidence. Alvin Kamara, my RB9, and the Broncos defense, my number 1 defense on the week. I'm considering to flex Courtland Sutton, my wide receiver 32, but you really don't have to. He's just a floor play, really. Bo Nix in a super flex league is top 20 at quarterback 16. I would consider his high floor. And then the Saints at defense number 12 also have a decent floor, but not high enough of a ceiling for me to trust. Otherwise, though, I'm benching everyone else here on the screen. Javonte, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, Bub Means, Spencer Rattler, Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, the Denver tight ends, Jamaal Williams, Kendre Miller, Devon Villay, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Cedric Wilson, and A.T. Perry. None of them are in your lineup. So very few players are relevant for fantasy this week, at least on Thursday. It is not the game to be starting most of these options. However, let's get into the final score prediction. It's going to be an ugly one, but I definitely think the Broncos win comfortably. There's no way Sean Payton loses in his return to New Orleans with 3 of the Saints' best players, Carr, Olave, and Shaheed, unavailable. There's no way the Saints win this game. So Denver wins comfortably. Final score 27-13. Denver will cover that 3-point spread. And this kind of feels misguided. The over-under on this game is 37.5. But I do think they can crack 40 collectively. That's a very low number. Give me the over on the line. Don't feel great about it, but I project 40 points in this game. Final score, Denver wins 27-13. But before I leave you, I also give you a bet, and this is some real degenerate shit this week. We won on last week's picks. We made $180 off a $3 bet. And this week, we might get more, but oh my God, I really have no confidence that I know what's going to happen tonight. So this is a very risky bet. I only put down $2, but because it's so risky, the payout is insane. I used a 31% profit boost, and we will return $268.92 if all 5 of these picks hit on only a $2 buy-in. So if you want to join me, use code Nice and Blunt on SignUp on Underdog and get your first deposit matched by 50%. Here is the bet. I do not think Kamara is successful this week. Last week, he only had 94 total yards against Tampa, and I think it's going to be worse this week. I do not think he goes over 100 for the second week in a row. So give me the under on 99.5 total yards in this game. I think it might be close. I think he might come close to 90, but I really do not think he goes over 100. So the box will be stacked. I really think everyone is going to be trying to stop him. He'll be okay, but he does not go over 100 total yards. Give me the under on Kamara, 99.5. I'm taking a shot here on Courtland Sutton, though. I think a touchdown is possible. He has scored 2 over the last 4 games. Give me the over on the touchdown for Courtland Sutton. We are gambling after all. I don't feel great about it, but the payout feels nice. That is a scorcher, and it does help me get to this $270 total. However, Audric Estime has 2 games this season with at least 13 rushing yards. He's averaging 6.8 yards per carry, and I think he will get close to 5 touches in this game. So all he needs to do is get those 5 touches and average like 3 yards per carry. I think he can do it. This is a very achievable line for Audric Estime. I think they'll be leading. The game script will benefit him. I think he'll get some work. So give me the over on Audric Estime, 14 rushing yards. And then Blake Grupe, I don't see how the Saints offense generates 2 touchdowns. So give me the under on 1.5 extra points made. He'll probably kick some field goals, but I do not see more than 1 touchdown from the Saints offense. So unless their defense scores, I think this one is the safest one of them all. Give me the under on Blake Grupe, 1.5 extra point. The last one, though, is a very risky one and very misguided by yours truly, but I think it's worth betting on for the sake of entertainment. Give me the touchdown to hit on Jaleel McLaughlin this week. He's the only Broncos running back to find the end zone. He has 2 this season. Meanwhile, Javonte doesn't have a single touchdown. So let's say Jaleel finds the end zone. Let's say Estime gets involved. Sutton also scores a touchdown. Kamara's held in check. And the Saints offense only scores 1 touchdown max. That is a viable path to success on this bet. So I kind of like it. I only put down $2 because it's very unlikely to hit, but let's fucking go. $2 into 268. That sounds like a fun evening to compensate for a gross game. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I will see you next time in the next video. My name is Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.